All right, and we are live on Facebook. Councilmember, please take it away.
All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is the District 10 Community Connections that we usually do a couple times a month. My staff, as usual, is here standing by to take any questions. If you just want to put them enter them in the Q&A. If you're on Zoom or if you're on Facebook, put them in the comments section, and we'll try to answer them. And the December edition of the newsletter was released this week. And so it's filled with great information, upcoming events. And so if you have missed it, please visit us on sjd10.com and look it up, and it'll be online. So we'll start with our updates as usual. I will tell you that this upcoming Tuesday is my last city council meeting representing the citizens of the city of San Jose in District 10. I've enjoyed serving all of you, and I have a lot of things that I still want to do for our community, but I wanted to end on a good note. I've presented a plan to help bring in workforce housing without raising taxes. What I mean by that is housing for teachers and our firefighters and people who work in our restaurants. They'll have opportunity with this JPA called Cal CHA, which is going to be discussed. It's a new way of doing bonds and having investors pay for housing for our workforce housing. And the meeting will start. On Tuesday at 11 a.m. That's a little bit unusual. So if you want to visit the city's website, go to the city clerk's office page, or you could look it up in our newsletter, or go to District 10 at sanjoseca.gov for the Zoom link. So, and also on the city clerk's website, you can find information on how to apply for the city's redistricting commission. And there's still some positions open, so please do that if you're interested in serving our community. This past Tuesday, the council approved the city's data privacy policy. This is something that I've been very interested in ever since that we were trying to put cameras down everybody's streets with this all-com technology. And even though I didn't, even though it didn't succeed like 4 years ago when I put it, we finally passed a privacy policy on Tuesday. So I'm very proud of that. And so still a work in progress though. I can tell you that Google is also moving forward with this project and continues to do some more activity on presenting its, it presented its final plans, and we'll start moving forward next year. I've also been very proud to work on something called the Poverty Pandemic, and it's a group of folks that are faith community, business, and nonprofits and government. We all working together to make sure that we can give a hand up to those that are vulnerable and those who've lost their jobs, for example, in the restaurant sector or the travel sector or the hospitality like hotels. A lot of those folks are looking for jobs right now, and this is a great way to get involved. Government can't solve all these problems, and so we've asked our religious community to step up and see if we can hire people can hire or donate online. And our call to action is that if you have a job that you can employ somebody, call our Work to Future, and they'll actually pay for training somebody for the first couple of months. So take advantage of 2 months free trainees. If you know somebody who's looking for a job, refer them to Work to Future. And if you need a gardener, please employ a gardener or somebody to clean the home. Or if you go to a restaurant, please tip heavily. I know that we can't go to restaurants, but please tip the people and participate in making sure that they stay alive with all the pandemic going on here. We also had a play garden update. The capital campaign is starting. We're starting to collect money. Our goal is to raise $3.7 million to take a project that is currently at $1.3 million and turn it to a great project This is the all-inclusive playground at Almaden Lake, and it'll be on the west side of the Almaden Expressway. It's a tot lot that we hope to replace and make it into an all-inclusive play garden. And we'd like to make it a beautiful part of our community. So get involved, and we're going to actually be putting a link on how to contribute to this very worthy cause. So if you have wanted to do some tax deductions at the end of the year, there's a great cause, and it'll be a great asset to the Almaden Valley and a great asset to the community in general. So people of all ages can play together at the lake. Now, after the updates, I wanted to introduce our special guests. I actually used to serve for 6 years on VTA, and I'm going to have one of my staff members introduce Janice. Adrian, are you there?
Yes, hi, council member. So today we have two very special guests from VTA. I'll read their bios now. So we have Janice Soriano-Ramos. She is a senior transportation planner on VTA's service planning team, where she manages the annual transit service plan process, monitors the performance of VTA's bus and light rail service, and oversees other transit service programs that promote community partnerships, such as the Express Bus Partnership Program. Janice has enjoyed her past several years back in the Bay Area, working on a wide range of exciting transportation programs and projects. Through her work in consulting, program management, and now in the public sector. A proud Santa Clara native, she loves being part of an amazing team that's responsible for the shaping of the transit network that she's grown up with. We also have Brandi Childress. She is the public affairs manager for VTA, who has had the pleasure of serving in various public relation roles since 2001. She leads a fantastic team responsible for media relations, internal and external communications, community outreach, and public engagement. Her and her team get the opportunity to work on all kinds of great transportation projects throughout Santa Clara County with many different audiences, including community and business associations, businesses and nonprofits, construction and design teams, other transit and government agencies, city and regional partners, elected officials, and news media. Welcome to Janice and Brandi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. And I apologize for butchering your name, Janice, at the beginning.
No worries at all. It's a common mistake.
Well, let's start with the elephant in the room. What's going to happen with the bus routes in the Almaden Valley?
Sure. Should we start with questions or presentation we've got prepared?
Presentation. I apologize. If you have a presentation, let's start with that. I apologize.
Okay, no, not a problem. Happy to roll with it, however you'd like to do it. But
yeah, we're live here, so.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, we do have a brief presentation we'd like to share with the community here. And first off, I just want to start off by saying thank you to all of you who have been rolling with us throughout this entire year. It's not, needless to say, it's been a wild ride with dealing with COVID, these unprecedented times. And I know everyone's got a ton of questions about what this means for transit and what lies ahead for us. And really how we wanted to shape this conversation is, what's really top and, really what our focus is for the future of transit is rebuilding your confidence in public transit. So that's really been central to every decision we've made, from all the different service changes you might have observed. So just setting the stage here for tonight. And so I'll just get started without further ado. If Brandi wants to flip to the next slide here. So for those of you who have followed VTA, you may remember that just months before this pandemic hit, we did launch the 2019 New Transit Service Plan. And as you know, it's the product of several years of conversation and collaboration with the community who's really been with us throughout all this time. And they've provided thousands of comments along the way. And this has been the largest transit service network redesign in decades. So it's a pretty big deal. And with the rollout of any new service, anyone can expect months, and in transit's case, perhaps even years before you really see any increase or any positive sort of, impact as far as how many riders we see riding our system. But despite only running for just a few short 3 months here, to our surprise, we started to see riders coming to our service and board our system much more compared to the same time last year, as I'll show you on the next slide. So just to walk you through this is a chart that shows on average how many riders we've seen both on our bus and our light rail service each month, with the light blue line showing our 2019 ridership and the dark blue line showing this year's ridership, just to give you a comparison there. So you'll see that if you look at the February line there, before COVID hit, we were actually trending 5% higher if you were to compare it to February of 2019. And again, that's not the kind of increase that you see immediately after you launch a new transit service. So it was awesome news for us. But of course, the minute shelter in place happened and the county orders hit us in March, our ridership dipped and then it dropped to its lowest point in April. And while we have seen ridership increase over time throughout this year, it's been steady and somewhat stagnant throughout the year as well. And as you'd expect during these unprecedented times, our ridership patterns haven't really been reflecting anything remotely close to what you've seen in 2019, where you see more of those seasonal up and downs of how people use transit over the course of a year. Next slide, please. And in these unprecedented times, some of you may know that we've been adjusting our service as we come along here, just factoring in so many things that we've observed during the pandemic. Everything from the shelter in place orders, which took effect in March, which we also dropped down our service down to almost half of what our service was in pre-COVID times. But we've been able to gradually recover our service over time, putting more service back out on the road, providing essential trips to, of course, support our most essential workers and all the essential trips that we would like to continue providing. So we were able to add most of that service back on August 10th this year, and we've been able to bring several routes back that we had once suspended early on in the year. So that's been great news to see. Next slide. So I know we've discussed a lot of numbers already in just these early slides, but what does this translate to exactly as far as what service you see out there today? Consider this slide a snapshot of what our service looks like. Before COVID, our service on bus and light rail generally used to run well past 9 p.m., but we've since reduced how late our service runs, and we've also reduced how frequently our bus and light rail service comes as well compared to what we ran in pre-COVID times. As far as our paratransit service goes, it is still an active service that we provide, and we are seeing about the same amount or the same lower demand that you've seen across our network. But even though we haven't been able to run our smaller paratransit vehicles due to COVID restrictions, we have been able to retrofit some of our minivans that we use in our paratransit service to protect both the riders and our operators. So in that picture you see at the top there, you'll see these little driver bubbles that we were able to add to our paratransit vehicles. Next slide, please.
So this is more stage setting, if I may. Janice really did a great job of letting you all know what we've been up against. We've all kind of been in the same boat, but when you have the Centers for Disease Control and everyone from the federal, state, and local levels telling you that public transit is not safe and you shouldn't ride it, it's really difficult to provide mass transit and be effective at it when you're being told to stay away from it. So my job at VTA is to, work on that public perception and make people feel confident that this is something that they can trust. Initially, we had to really bring back what we were doing as far as service was concerned. We were told, when that first stay-at-home order happened in March, that if it was, you could not travel unless it was essential. So we did get right to work and messaging that with customers. We got a little cheeky because we needed people to understand the importance of this. And if you were not, on the bus or light rail for an essential trip, then why are you even here reading this sign that was up at all of our bus stops and all of our transit centers? We really needed people to stay home if they didn't need to get to an essential job, so we could have room for others on board. The rear door boarding was something that we initiated. We were the first in the Bay Area to do this. The rear door boarding was implemented so we could keep distance between our operators and the boarding customer. We did not have a mechanism yet to keep a barrier between them. But the challenging part on this, of course, was that our fare boxes were at the front of all of our vehicles. So by nature, we ended up suspending the fare collection. I think through almost August, if I'm remembering correctly. So we had been down from March to August, not collecting fares. We were, of course, limiting capacity. You see in the picture above to the right that we have blocked off seating. That big red X was blocking off the front door and the priority seating for customers with mobility devices and the elderly with mobility issues. So that we had that separated as well. And maybe, a couple months later, you get some other articles and more media attention on that. Public transit might not really be a source of where people are being infected with the virus. And there's little evidence of this, but at this point, that bell has been rung, and it's really hard to unring that. So we were, still battling this public perception issue, and frankly, we still are. But communicating during COVID was, my main responsibility with our team. We immediately put out, we built a information center on our website, front and center, everything you needed to know about COVID and how that related to our service. We used every digital channel we could get our hands on. We had, and we still have all of these, in place, but in-field signage on A-frames in multiple languages. We had onboard signage. We even had our board chair, Cindy Chavez, doing PSAs on TV so that people understood all of the things that we were trying to do to keep them safe while they were traveling. And that really moved us to a more permanent plan. We called it our 10-point plan to strengthen trust in transit. And again, really touting one of the first public agencies in the Bay Area to initiate this. We rolled it out July 1st. We needed people to know that we were safe, clean, responsive. We were doing everything we could to sanitize the vehicles, wiping down frequently touched surfaces. We needed folks to know that our operators had all the personal protection equipment they could get their hands on. These plastic barriers, I love talking about these because the operator shown in that bottom picture, these plastic barriers, there's very heavy duty barriers that you can get your hands on for quite, it's pretty expensive, and we're still installing those, but as an interim idea, our teams came up with this, and they built these plastic drawdown shades at our divisions and installed them. And we were really pleased with how people came together and got really creative to figure out a way to keep customers and operators distanced and safe so we could start collecting fares again. Of course, we've had to increase the vehicle airflow. The HVAC systems are a big discussion around the industry and how you keep that air exchange flowing so people are getting fresh air constantly. And then, of course, it's our job to emphasize that people have to be responsible. You have to take care of your own hygiene. You have to wash your hands. You have to wear a mask. You can't be on our system if you're sick. So we wanted to make sure everything that we were saying and doing was resonating. Was it making a difference? We've been surveying a couple of times throughout the pandemic and in different languages to really understand the perception and the sentiment of how people are feeling, not only now, but how do they expect to ride in the future. And of course, every couple of months, we think we're going to climb out of this. We were in the orange tier for a while, and we thought we were heading in a great direction. We were getting ready to market our services again and attract more people. We were looking at the public health officials to help us reduce the 6-foot limit on our bus to 3 feet. And then, weeks later, we get into the purple tier. So we are now back to these very strict policies. But the no mask, no ride policy that we implemented on May the 4th has been a huge attraction for people. People need to know that we're taking that very seriously and that we're enforcing that. We have our transit patrol. They are out there, they educate first and then they enforce. We did, not initially, but we have over time installed all masks and hand sanitizer dispensers on board vehicles. There's a picture up there showing that. And then of course the 6-foot social distance, we're still in that area. And you'll see here down to the right is a infographic of something we're also quite proud of, which is introducing and rolling out real-time crowding information on our buses. We've endorsed the transit app. I encourage everybody to download that if you're on the system. And it gives you real-time information when the bus is coming and how many people are on it or what you can expect. If it's not crowded, you'll get a seat. If it's crowded, we may end up in a capacity issue that results in a pass up. And we are going to get into that here in a second. What we are seeing is that above and beyond everything else, whether we're clean, we're safe, we're doing all the right things, the pass ups have become the biggest issue for us. We are leaving people to have to rely on maybe getting the next bus that comes by. Being unreliable is not where we want to be. So with this issue, we've had to do some pivoting on what we're doing with our service, which leads me to pivot back to Janice.
Thanks, Brandi. So the biggest question I've certainly had, and I think I've already said this, is will transit ever return back to normal? And it's safe to say that we've asked that for nearly everything. Is anything going to return back to normal? Or if not normal, what's our new normal going to look like? And I think the most important thing to acknowledge here is that none of this recovery that we really strive for will happen overnight. And it's just going to take a few steps to get there. And while we are always going to have the long game in mind, we also want to stay nimble and provide solutions that try to resolve more of the immediate issues that we've been observing firsthand. And that last slide before this one that Brandi showed really gave a picture, a really huge glimpse, an overview of what those immediate issues are. And pass ups was by far number one. So near term, what you can expect from us is that we are pouring our existing resources towards trying what we can to alleviate these passenger pass-up issues where we can. Now, it won't 100% resolve the issue, but what this means is that we are going to increase our frequency on routes where we've seen the most pass-up issues. What this also means is that our service will continue to be well below our pre-COVID service levels in the meantime while we try to resolve that, as well as comply with public health orders. And longer term, it's our hope that as time goes on, it could be a matter of years, we'll be able to return to what our pre-COVID service looks like. And when we launched the 2019 new transit service plan with y'all, we really set the bar high, and we really wanted to make sure we were having an annual conversation with the community to make sure that we could improve that service that we all worked so hard on together, right? And so we don't want that to be a one and done plan. But going back to our near-term plan here, which is what you see on the slide here, COVID still continues to impact our service. Our transit ridership continues to be down by 70% compared to last year. And with these with the public health orders that are in place, that actually brings down the number of people that we're able to hold on our bus and light rail service down to about 80 to 90% below that. So this all became clear to us that being able to resolve these passive issues was the more immediate issue at hand. And we had earlier conversations with our community here, as some of you may know, as to what our 2021 transit service plan would look like, more of that annual process I was referring to. But we've decided that it was best we put that on ice and just focus on what we can to alleviate issues on these 7 routes that you see here, which, as you can tell, are our most frequent routes as well. And the next slide, I believe, I'll actually transition that back over to Brandi.
So we're really still in this holding pattern of, not increasing service. We're back to now really telling people if it's not an essential trip, then you really should be at home. It's not our job to enforce the stay-at-home order, but we really need to make sure that people are staying home so the essential workers can be on the system and get where they need to go. And this is actually a bus route that we do have, just really paying homage to the people who are out there risking their lives literally to keep this economy moving. So we are grateful for them. We want to make sure we have capacity for them. Really trying to continue to promote our transit app with the real-time features. We want to move away from the contact payment. We want people to download the apps that you can pay for your ride through your phone. I know that doesn't always work for people, but the Clipper card is a great way to be contactless as well. And then everything, of course, that we are doing is multilingual, it's diverse. We want to show that, we represent the community that is, that we move, and proud to do so. Not only on the local level, but on a national and regional commitment level. We have joined all the other Bay Area transit operators on their Bay Area Healthy Transit Plan. It is a dashboard, it's resulted in a dashboard that we report out numbers to every month on how many passengers are wearing their face coverings, not even, just wearing, but properly wearing them. How our vehicle capacity is doing, and how our employees are doing. Are they wearing face coverings? Are they following protocols? What contract tracing is like when we do get operators or any employee testing positive for COVID. And I will say, we are not in a bubble. We are absolutely affected. We have, had 57 employees to date contact the COVID virus, contract the COVID virus. 38 of those folks have come back to work and they're operating. And I do want to put that in perspective. We have almost 2,100 employees, and this pandemic has been going on for many months. So, not a great statistic, one that we don't want to have, but I think we're right in line with right under the bar there. So making sure we're reporting those numbers. And then on the national level, there's definitely another commitment to all operators just doing the same stuff, enforcing the same rules, so it's consistent for people. So with that, we are really looking forward to questions. This is like the new face of transit. We've got people, not very many people on board right now, which is not our goal, long term, but wearing face masks and doing the right things is absolutely where we want to be. The one thing I will, pitch, before we turn it over to questions, I love, Councilmember, your initiative with Cal CHA. I think it's super important to have housing and, affordable housing for those people who need it most. What I am going to pitch is that you add transit workers to that list. We could really, use them, have them living closer to where they work would be great.
Well, honestly, it's just income dependent. I think they would all qualify for this program. Absolutely. I don't single out teachers. I just use them as an example, but absolutely our bus drivers could very, very well qualify for this. It's basically, it's housing that is anywhere between 80 to 120 AMI, the average median income for the area. So I think that they would qualify for that. And thank you for that. And you're welcome to come testify for that.
You got it. I'm there.
In fact, please do. Let's jump into some questions that I've heard from the public here. You know, everybody knows that VTA is struggling financially. Obviously, you've talked about a whole mess of issues with pass-ups and everything else. And you having to increase routes for those ones, the routes that are that have more, more ridership. What's going to happen to the Almaden community? What, like bus route 13 and 63, and I think there's, what's happening with the bus routes? When I was on VTA, they were talking about cutting those back then in the good times. So what's happening now?
So right now, just to give it a little bit of context, I did mention we had earlier conversations about what our 2021 transit network would look like. And this was back in the spring where, we certainly knew a lot less than what we know now. And given the information at the time, we really wanted to have this open, transparent conversation with the community and our board about, what if we had these three scenarios, like what if we had to cut our service by down to 30, as worse as 30%. And we had these illustrative scenarios that we walked our community through. And as we were developing these scenarios, we really took a step back and we wanted to make sure that we were accomplishing what we wanted to. And one of our top priorities when we developed this scenario was we really did not want to eliminate any full routes at all. That was our number one thing, and we really tried our hardest when we developed those scenarios to not have to make any cuts. So to really just get down to your question, once we started talking to the community, we really, we took that off the board. I know at one point we had discussed a scenario where the Route 83, which is the new 13, would have been eliminated in, our worst case scenario. But it became clear to us with the board and with the community that a 30% increase was just the most undesirable thing, and we certainly didn't want to do that. So in the immediate term, we are not faced with any cuts to Almaden Valley routes. And we don't anticipate even in, our 2021 plan or whatever future more permanent plan that we have that we would make complete cuts to any routes. So I hope that allows the elephant to exit the room.
There you go. Well, that's great to hear. I'm sure a lot of people are relieved hearing that. When I was on VTA, we actually applied for a grant and to experiment with on-demand services. And we were supposed to start a pilot in the Almaden Valley. What happened to that project? I know we actually received the grant.
Janice, are you taking that one? I know that we did a couple of years ago now. It was Johnny, I think you were on the board at the time when we did Flex. And it was that pilot.
It wasn't. It wasn't Flex. It wasn't Flex. It was on demand. So Flex that experiment obviously didn't work out, but that's not what we're talking about. It was an experiment where we would hire, say, Yellow Cab or whoever, through a via on demand app, and we actually received money for that. I don't know what's happened to that idea. That's the time we were actually thinking about cutting Route 13, and I said, don't cut it unless we have on demand. And then you guys applied for a grant, got it, and then I haven't heard anything since.
I am remembering the last time we presented on that. Janice, let's follow up with ICO because we did. I remember her presenting to the board, and it was going to be a pilot, and I honestly don't know why that got shelved.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to that effort, but I do know that we aren't, permanently shelving the idea of an on-demand service. In fact, we're really trying to diversify what we can provide as VTA, because not only are we a transit agency, we're also a congestion management agency, and we want to look at other ways, transit or not. I mean, not to, totally cannibalize on our transit service, but we want to look at solutions like that perhaps serve a market that we haven't quite tapped into. And I for certain, I know that as part of our alternative mobility solutions effort, on demand is something that we want to undust and start to look at again. So we will follow up with ICO on
Yeah, I'd appreciate
where
that,
we're
since,
headed with that.
since I'm 99% sure we got the grant. And so, I mean, it could only mean that you either didn't spend it yet or had to send it back. So I'm wondering about that, if you can, yeah. Anyway, yeah, congestion management. Not a lot of people know that you are the ones who are taking care of highways like Highway 85 and 87 and what have you. So it's good that you let everyone know. So my constituents will occasionally ask, and will no doubt ask my successor, if there will ever be plans to resurrect the Almaden light rail. Is that in the, in the cards? Right now, I know that you're doing a bus workaround, but the rails are still there. What is there any new plans, or can we turn that into a bicycle lane?
I like this innovation here. So I will be honest, I don't believe we've had discussions as of late to bring back the Almaden light rail line. As some of you may know, we did realize that that line in particular, that Almaden spur, had far lower ridership compared to the rest of our light rail system. And generally speaking, light rail does cost twice as much to operate when you look at it on a per hour basis, when you compare it to bus. And Councilmember Khamis, you certainly mentioned that we do serve the Almaden line more or less with our 64A route. So that area is certainly not left without service, but we haven't really talked about bringing light rail service back on that line.
I am with the council member, though. I want to turn, my wish for that line is to turn it into an autonomous, pilot grid, to where we can really innovate and see if that's something in the future.
Yeah, that would be good. And some futuristic vehicle could run autonomously. That would be great.
Right.
So we just talked about pass ups. These buses normally hold how many, and then how many can they hold with the current configuration? It didn't look like too many from that picture that you put up.
No,
And
it's really not many.
Yeah.
Kind of the rule of thumb, when we're talking about a 60-foot bus, you can get about 58 people in it. 60 is this, a 40-foot bus is about 38 people. So and our 30-foot is about 28 people. So that's kind of, you think of it in feet, right?
Yeah.
Right now, our 40-foot bus, we can have 8 to 10 people on it.
Wow.
And that is just not enough. And I do appreciate, I think there was a question that I saw about, can we have family members, can that be reduced by groups and families being able to ride together? We do allow that. So that does allow us to increase capacity a little bit on the buses, so we can get up to 12 to 15. If we all have, if there was 4 families traveling, they could all scrunch together and make room. But it's so, you just don't know what you're going to get when you're in the field. So that is exactly why we were really, there's a study that was commissioned with the Mineta Transportation Institute and Fresno State to look at this HVAC system and the air exchange and the turnover. And we were really trying to advocate for that 3-foot distance. San Francisco Muni was successful in doing that. So we were trying to take, a page out of their playbook. I'd be curious to know if they're gonna have to go back though, because they're in the same boat now as everyone else. But we were looking to do that, and we had an infield demonstration. We went as far as getting the health officials a bus out to the county, and they got on board, and we did this whole demonstration. And like I said, a couple weeks later, we went back into the purple tier, and it was like all bets are off. So,
yeah, these are strange times we're living in. Let's take some questions from the public. I know that there was a few guests here starting to type in questions. Adrian, can you see if we have any questions from the public?
Yes, thank you, council member. So we do have a couple of questions coming in from the public that we can start off with. So the first question is from Bob on Facebook. And he asks, where is the VTA financially?
Yeah, I can take that one. We are right now, we've gone through the board adopted our 2-year budget last June. So we will be going back, going through that process. But fortunately, the CARES Act from the federal government gave us money to, put the Band-Aid over our finances for this year. But most all transit agencies across the nation, they've spent 94% of that allocation. We're there, we're done. We've spent it. That's why so many transit agencies right now they have this call to action to Congress we need a second tranche of money, and we're advocating for $32 billion across the nation to help us get through this pandemic and help economies recover out of this pandemic. So, we are working with our board right now to give them pictures of, some forecasts of what we're dealing with. Right now, everything is very status quo. We have not had any discussions about, service reductions at the moment. Fare increases aren't usually a tactic when it comes to, you don't flip a switch overnight to increase fares. Frankly, our fares only cover 8 to 9% of our operating costs anyway. So that's not a discussion at the moment, but it's definitely on the horizon to talk with our board on, what strategies we can implement to not only decrease our costs, but increase our revenues.
Thank you. And so we have a question from Jeffrey, which is quite similar, and you kind of touched on it with the fares, but maybe if you have some more depth you can go into, that'd be great. And Jeffrey's asking, do you anticipate fare increases to make up for the reduced revenue?
Oh yeah, that, like I said, that the $2.50 for an adult fare doesn't cover up nowhere near a cost of a ride. That covers about 10% of it. So our system is heavily subsidized by local sales tax revenues, and we are extremely fortunate to have forward-thinking voters who prioritize transit. And we've had a couple of measures pass to help support transit operations. So that really gets it done for the operating side. I think where it's at is really trying to decrease the costs. And I think some of the questions we've been getting about, well, if you're increasing frequency on routes, that means you're increasing costs. And right now we have the resources to do it. We don't have to increase operators, which is, operators' salaries and benefits. That's the heavy cost. And we don't, we want to avoid having to decrease service, which means, furloughing people on the operation side. Like, we're really, really trying to avoid that. So, advocating for that federal funding is going to be super important. I think there is some progress happening there, so we're glad for that. But yeah, we have not, talked about increasing fares, and that's a heavy lift. Like, if that's something we do, you're going to hear about it, because we have to have a ton of public engagement on something like that.
Yeah, it actually brings me to a slightly different question. Since light rail costs so much to operate, what's been happening with the extension to Eastridge? Is that still going to be built, or is it? So you're saying yes?
Yeah, we're still moving along with that project. It's fits and starts, but we definitely have we've got funding from all different sources. So it's very much in the project development phases. We've started a stakeholder working group that really emphasizes getting engaged public members in those neighborhoods to come to the table and work with us on what this is going to look like. It's taken a really long time to get this project off the ground. And, as being a board member for VTA, there's, we have representatives from all over the county, and we represent 15 cities on our board. So you've got definitely the political will to get this project done. And we're trying to deliver on that promise since 2000.
Even though it might not be the most financially wise decision, but okay. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Adrian. Can you ask any more questions from the public?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Jeffrey, and he is asking if there is public information showing the number of folks using VTA per light train stop.
Sure, I can take that one. Thanks for your question, Jeffrey. We have public information on our ridership. It is, as I know, updated according to what our pre-COVID numbers look like. But what we're working on is a really great transit performance monitoring program that allows our public to really see this information in a much more visual way. But as far as our current light rail service and what the current ridership looks like, that if that's certainly something of interest to the public, I do know that our GIS team is working hard on that, and I think they've got like a COVID-19 dashboard that's up. So I'm happy to follow up with this group to unearth that. Brandi, did you have anything to add? Oh, okay, great. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So we have some more questions, and a reminder to everyone who's watching live to put your questions in either the Zoom chat or the Zoom Q&A box or on the comments box on Facebook. But we do have some questions to ask. This one is asking about going all electric. So we know that VTA is pushing to have an all electric fleet by 2040 to meet the state deadline. And we're wondering if we can expect service to be uninterrupted even if we have damage to the power grid or have PG&E be unreliable. How can we count on service if we're going to go all electric?
So I can try my best to tackle this question. I'll admit I'm not the subject matter expertise on this particular effort, but in following the effort and what my colleague has done such a wonderful job leading, I think I owe it to this effort to kind of clarify where that stands. And VTA is certainly intending to meet this requirement by 2040, but we haven't exactly committed to operate battery electric buses fleet-wide at this point. But we are looking at a short-term solution as well as a long-term solution. So short-term, what this is looking like, I do know that we are looking to use battery electric buses for some of our shorter service blocks. So anything that is operating under 150 miles or so. And next year, as part of that short-term plan in 2021, our study will look into whether battery electric buses or hydrogen fuel cell buses are the best choice for more of our longer range blocks. So that's kind of what the short-term sort of effort is looking like right now. And in that analysis, I'm really glad this question came up because, I was talking to my colleague and he had mentioned, resiliency is certainly a consideration when our agency is trying to figure out what the best solution is for the strategy. So he's kind of shared with me that they've got some ideas in the pipeline already as far as trying to, make sure that our service is resilient in this case. So, he's mentioned, storing hydrogen in large quantities on site. We could also store electricity through microgrids. We could also invest more in solar panels as a good backup strategy so that we don't have any interruptions as far as what buses we'd be able to power. And of course, in the event of more of these larger interruptions, if we needed to have something as an emergency backup, we'd invest in something perhaps like a small portion of our fleet to be more of a hybrid diesel solution. So I hope that addresses that question to the best of my ability, but it was a fantastic question. I love following this effort. So
Great,
thanks.
Thank you. So we have a question now from Michael, and he is asking, does light rail routinely have pass-ups?
It hasn't been an issue, no.
It's definitely mostly on the bus side because we don't have capacity issues on light rail. Light rail is a workhorse for the kind of our tech workforce, and tech workforce gets to stay home. So we're really, we were able to not operate light rail for a few weeks. We had initially on the onset of the pandemic, out of an abundance of caution, we stopped running light rail because we thought we had a COVID case with one of our operator trainees. And not that it didn't go undetected, this not having light rail service, but we were able to, shut down service during the stay-at-home order, and we gradually brought the light rail service back. We weren't initially operating it over the weekends when we brought it back. We finally did in June. So we're seeing a slight uptick in light rail ridership, but our buses are definitely our workhorses right now.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. So this next question is pretty specific to District 10. So as we know, District 10 is a suburban community, and this also kind of relates to environmental sustainability, because we know that San Jose has a lot of sprawled communities. And the question is, long-term post-COVID, is there any plans for VTA to integrate sprawled communities so that buses can compete with cars, for example? Is there anything, any plans for that?
So that's a great question. I do want to generally address it first by, really opening the discussion on the fact that transit often has two competing objectives. They seem, well positioned, but the more you think about it, they're very competing. So transit is there to really hit up the areas with the most ridership, and it functions the best when you have the most riders on board. It functions the most productive and the most efficiently it can. But on the other hand, on the flip side, you have transit that tries to be more of a coverage purpose, and it's meant to go out into the more suburban communities, like you had mentioned, and really wants to make sure that it's serving community services, hospitals, your most essential services, right? So there's no arguing there that they're two equal but competing objectives there. But transit really does work best where you see land uses that are in close proximity to each other. They're higher density areas where community services, businesses, and residential areas are kind of cohesive in one area. And you also want to encourage more transit activity where there's safe pedestrian environments. So anywhere where pedestrians feel the most safe walking. You don't want to, put transit service where in dangerous areas where there's potentially that conflict between vehicles and a lot of other modes there. And it's certainly not pleasant having to wait at a really long intersection where you're crossing these massive expressways, right? So I will say that transit does work best in those areas, but I certainly understand too that, coverage type services are a priority to our communities too. And transit may not fit every single community best, but that doesn't mean that we can't explore other options like, the on-demand services that we had talked about. Perhaps there's opportunities to make other transit modes like van pooling and carling much more accessible to other communities as well.
All right, thank you. I think we have time for probably one more question. And this question is, similar to suburban areas. A lot of the stops in suburban areas don't have sun or rain shelters. And we're wondering, is it possible that affects the willingness to wait for the bus? Has it been studied at all if shelters affect riders' willingness to wait at all?
I can't say that VTA has done a specific study on the impact of, the presence of shelters and how that affects people's willingness to ride. But, there's no arguing that in addition to having great, really frequent and reliable service, that, having a shelter in times where it's really hot or just freezing cold out there. Well, we're in California. We're really lucky it doesn't get that cold. But there's no arguing that that would contribute to, a positive passenger experience. So I would say that, for services that run at maybe 30 minutes or less frequently, I could see that shelters would be, a top most requested amenity for a passenger to have. When your service is just not coming as often, you're waiting for your bus for a little bit longer. This does give me actually the opportunity to highlight that we do have a new program within my team that looks at how we can improve the bus stop experience for our riders. So it looks at different amenities such as what we can do to add shelters, better lighting, look at ways where we could improve ADA amenities for the disabled. So that is a much more comprehensive program that's new to us, and that'll have more of, a public facing opportunity and more opportunity for our community to connect and express to us what they feel is, of the utmost priority for the passenger experience. So I do want to highlight that. So thanks for that question.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Janice and Brandi, for being here with us. I think you put a lot of people's minds at ease on the bus routes, and I hope to see that VTA does recover from the current fiscal situation, and we do things wisely. And I'm sure you guys will be working real hard for the next year and a half. So thank you for being on with us today.
It's our pleasure.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us. Thank you.
All right. So, in closing, I just want to remind everybody, I think that this month I'm trying to close out with a bang here. We have a packed full of fun webinars, and besides VTA on Saturday, December 12th at 10 a.m., you can tune in to an interactive farewell conversation with myself and Mayor Sam Liccardo. So that'll be a fun way to get to meet the mayor as well. And lastly, in a special event on Thursday, the 17th at 6:30 p.m. So this is Thursday, the 17th. I'll be putting on my chef's hat, and we'll be demonstrating how to make tabbouleh with Councilmember Pam Foley as my co-host. And last time I cooked, it was the most tuned in video Zoom meeting we've ever had. So hopefully you all join me on the 17th for that. To submit any questions in advance to either one of these meetings, you can always send us an email at district10@sanjoseca.gov, or check out my newsletter and on the events page, and then reply to that. Or you can visit us on sjd10.com for more information. I hope you really enjoyed this and you got something out of it, and we'll see you soon.